Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sam DeCoste, and I'm very happy to be back with you today. So much has happened in world football since our last show, and I am so excited to talk to you all about it. We have a full rundown, so let's get right into it today. I'm going to tell you about my Champions League superlatives, which include best coach, best goalkeeper, most valuable player, best team, most shocking upset. Stay tuned for those because there could be some pretty surprising ones in there. We're also going to talk about the state of Barcelona because obviously since their 8-2 loss to Bayern Munich, this club has spiraled into a full-blown crisis with their new manager and rumors of a Messi exit potentially this summer. So we're going to touch base with what's going on in the Camp Nou as well. We'll also end the show as always with our transfer mill. I'm going to tell you about all the latest transfer rumors, all the latest deals that have been announced as official, and we'll revisit all of the latest transfer sagas, including Jadon Sancho, and we'll also revisit the state of some clubs and what they're going to be doing in their mass overhauls for transfer policies this summer, which includes Barcelona, Juventus, etc. But there's no place better to start than the Champions League final, which just wrapped up on Sunday afternoon between Bayern Munich and PSG. The game finished 1-0 to Bayern Munich. The only goal came from Kingsley Coman at a 59th minute header, and that ended up being the difference between these two European giants. And so that is the 6th Champions League or European Cup trophy for Bayern Munich in their club history, and they now tie Liverpool for the third most in the competition's history. It's also the second ever treble for Bayern in a season in which they won the Bundesliga once again, the German Cup, and the Champions League, a feat that they've done twice already this year, and they did it last in the 2013 season in which they defeated Dortmund in the Champions League final. And in this game, Bayern were able to survive a lot of spells of creativity from PSG to hold on. Now, the result wasn't really in doubt for most of it. Bayern did have control of this game. They were able to keep PSG in check and contain the creativity and the attacking ability of Neymar, Mbappe, and Di Maria, although they had a few moments of flash and a few moments where they outsmarted the defenders with a few nutmegs and a few creative flair plays. But really, this game was about Manuel Neuer. While Manuel Neuer necessarily wasn't tested often, and he was hardly challenged, when he was challenged, he kept everything in front of him, and he helped control the game for Bayern Munich from the defensive side. As the last line of defense, when he was tested on occasion, whether it was a few tame shots from Neymar, whether it was just some attacks happening outside the box, but Bayern were congesting the attack, Neuer was there to make a few kick saves. He had some routine catches to make from shots down the middle. Neuer came up when he was counted on, and that often makes the difference between winning and losing a Champions League final. Just look what happened to Liverpool 2 seasons ago with Loris Karius when he was counted on. When the spotlight was on him as the last line of defense, he was absolutely humiliated, and now he will live in tournament infamy for that mistake that he made against Real Madrid when he allowed Karim Benzema to open the scoring. But on paper, this game finished 1-0. The first half was pretty entertaining. It was pretty back and forth. There was a spell where Bayern had a few opportunities on goal. They had some exchanges. Lewandowski hit the post. There were some chances for Mbappe and Neymar, but the second half was nothing like the first half. The first half was high energy, it was high tempo, it was energetic, and in the second half it really fell flat. And the offensive display, the flair that was happening, the entertainment just fizzled out, really. And so in this game, the first half really produced something special, and you had to think maybe it was going to be, or it was going to produce one of the better Champions League finals that we've seen, because just to pivot away for a moment, the Champions League finals in the last few years have really lacked in entertainment. Now, with goals, not as much. In this game, only one goal separated these two teams, and it is one of the lowest scoring Champions League finals in the past decade. In fact, it's the lowest scoring Champions League final since the 2016 final, in which Real and Atletico tied 1-1 after 120 minutes, and Real won on penalties. These Champions League finals have either been lopsided, comfortably won by the champion, or just dull throughout. Last year, Liverpool and Spurs played arguably the worst final in the tournament's history, at least the worst in the modern era and recent memory. Only a 2-0 scrappy win for Liverpool, in which it was just a possession-based game with hardly any goal-scoring opportunities or anything to write home about, really. There are hardly any highlights to talk about besides the 2 goals, one of which was a penalty in the second minute for Liverpool, so they were leading throughout. This game, the first half was promising, but the second half fell flat on its face, and it's really a shame that this game didn't produce as much goals, considering how many goals are in this team, or in these teams, and how many superstars were on show. You have Lewandowski, who scored 55 goals this year in all competitions, Neymar, Mbappe. It should have produced more goals than this, at least from the neutral perspective. Obviously, for Bayern, they won't mind. PSG would have hoped to get more goals. They would have hoped to win this game. But from a neutral's perspective, this game did not live up to the hype, which is unfortunate, because you do have 2 European titans going at it, and it only ended 1-0. It was a header, a scrappy header from Kingsley Coman, and that was what separated these two teams in the end. But like I said before, the result really sums it up. It was a narrow victory for Bayern Munich, and while the result doesn't necessarily show a dominant victory from the scoreline, this game was never really in doubt. Bayern controlled this game throughout. They were able to survive spells of flair and times when Neymar or Di Maria would put a ball past Davies' legs. But while PSG are uber talented up front, and they have a prolific attacking trident, and Di Maria, Mbappe, and Neymar was an amazing front three, and they did have their chances in this game, the better team won. There's no doubt about that the better team won this game. Bayern are much more experienced, and they were huge favorites for a reason. First of all, look at the experience that this team has. Look at the players that have played in major finals. Just look at players like Manuel Neuer, Thomas Muller, Jerome Boateng. All started this game. Each of them won a World Cup with Germany. You also have Tolisso, Pavard, and Hernandez. Now, while none of them started this game, they're still in the squad. They're in the bubble. They're all World Cup winners with France. This team already, when you count that up, that's 6 World Cup winners on Bayern. So they have the experience. They know what it takes to win a final. And that's something that you really can't teach. You can't coach if you're Hansi Flick. You can't just tell a Lewandowski or an Ivan Perisic or a Philippe Coutinho, this is how you play in the big games. This is how you handle the big moments. Because that's something you just have to learn. That's something you have to do when you find yourself in the big moments. And for Bayern, they already have that in abundance. And while they have the experience, they also have an insanely deep roster. Because from top to bottom, this starting 11 is absolutely loaded. Start from the goalkeeper to Manuel Neuer. The back line, while maybe their weakness this season with Jerome Boateng and David Alaba transitioning to playing center back once again, you have Davies and Kimmich on the wings. You have Goretzka and Thiago bossing the midfield. You have Lewandowski poaching the goals, with Perisic and Coutinho and Muller all making things happen in the midfield and threading killer passes to get through to the last line of defense. This team is just stacked on paper, and there's no hope to stop them. And the pace is one of their biggest strengths. And it showed all season, especially since the restart and in the Champions League campaign with Alphonso Davies, Kingsley Coman, Joshua Kimmich. The pace of Bayern was overwhelming, and it was too much for for PSG in a little bit. I mean, the pace wasn't the decider, the deciding factor in this game. Obviously, the deciding factor was Kingsley Coman's header. But Bayern, this campaign is bigger than this final because Bayern steamrolled the competition to make their way all the way to the final and end up winning their second treble in club history. And let's talk about Hansi Flick for a second, because just a few months ago, winning the treble for Bayern, making it where they got now, seemed like a pipe dream. It seemed virtually impossible, considering Bayern Munich were 7th in November. Bayern Munich were 7th place in the Bundesliga, on the verge of losing their grip on the German league. They sacked Niko Kovac, who really didn't turn out like they hoped he would, the former Frankfurt manager who won a German Cup with Frankfurt against Bayern in his last game as manager over there. They fire Kovac, and they hire Hansi Flick, who was just an interim manager, an in-house appointment, just to really just maintain the ship and not crash the boat while they looked for a long-term solution. But they got off to a fast start, and Hansi Flick just stayed on the team, and it ended up paying dividends, and Bayern really just steamrolled everybody. They won 21 straight games, going back all the way to the restart. Even before the restart, Bayern were on an absolute tear. They were unstoppable. And while their streak goes back to Kovac's sacking, they were unbeaten in the Champions League. They had a 100% record. They did not lose a single game. They didn't drop any points. And they just steamrolled everybody that stood in their way. They put 7 past Tottenham. They put 8 past Barca and spiraled them into a historic crisis. And they won the Champions League. I don't know what else you could say about Hansi Flick, how he could able to just come in to Bayern and just steer the ship, make things right, and end up leading this team to a Champions League win in a year with COVID-19, in a year with no fans, with one-legged affairs, in a year where all the favorites have been crashing out so early, from Liverpool to Real Madrid to Manchester City, Juventus, and Barcelona. Bayern were able to outlast that, and their talent was just too much to handle for all the underdogs that they had to face. And you could question the teams they've had to play. You could question Chelsea, because Chelsea really weren't at their best this year. You have Barcelona, who are the worst that they've ever been in the 21st century, and now they're spiraling into a crisis that could really transition them into a dark period for their club. And you have Lyon, who were very excellently managed this year, but they don't have the talent to stack up with Bayern by any means. And then you have PSG, who have a very talented roster. You have Keylor Navas, an experienced Champions League winner at goal. You have Berratti. You have Thiago Silva, who played his last game as a Parisian this game. And you have Neymar, Mbappe, and Di Maria. A very formidable team, a very talented team, although you could attribute PSG as a weaker opponent because man for man, you could argue who's more talented. But also PSG, as I've said time and time again, they've had a layoff for 5 months. Ligue 1 never resumed for them. So they've hardly played any competitive football in the past few months. Going back to March, they haven't played a league game at all. They played a cup final against Lyon. Then they played Atalanta, which they won at the last gasp with 2 last-minute goals to overcome Atalanta. And then they beat Leipzig, who really were also a fairy tale in the making, having Leipzig make it all the way to the semifinals. And then PSG, who really played about 5 competitive games in as many months, going up against Bayern, who had all these Bundesliga games to resume, who had competitive football to look forward to, and were also fresh from another round of 16 game against Chelsea to sort out their rust, in which they could beat up on a team that they already had a 3-goal aggregate lead on. So you could argue whether Bayern really were tested in their run to the Champions League final, but it won't matter in the end. It is the treble. The treble is an achievement that only 3 or 4 clubs have ever done, and this is just Bayern's second time of doing it. Not to mention that they finally ended their Champions League drought. They have not won the Champions League going back to 2013. This is a 7-year drought that has finally ended. And you may roll your eyes when I say the word drought, because it is a strong word considering Bayern Munich are such a glorified club that win trophies every single year. They always win Bundesliga. They win German Cup most of the time. And the Champions League, has always evaded them. At least in the past 7 years, they've really had a very difficult time making it back. After they won the treble, they appoint Pep Guardiola after his term in Barcelona, and there was a spell of 3 years where he could not get past the Spanish teams, losing to Real Madrid, losing to Barcelona, losing to Atletico Madrid, and then Pep leaves, and then they just can't get past Real Madrid, who went up winning the competition again and again. And then last year losing to Liverpool, who went on the competition again. So every time they've lost, they've gone out to like a team that has either made the final or has won the competition entirely. So while Bayern Munich are going out to the best teams, and there's no shame in losing to Real Madrid with Ronaldo, with Gareth Bale when he was still playing and wasn't worried about playing golf all the time or sleeping on the bench, when you lost to the MSN, and when you lost to Atletico Madrid playing great football, really playing stout defensively. Okay, losing to the best teams, there's no shame in that. But if you're Bayern Munich, you are one of the best teams, and if you want to be the best team, you have to beat the best teams. And for so long, that was something they just couldn't do. They couldn't get over that hump for the past almost full decade. And while they might have not had to play the best teams this year, because most of the best teams went out a long time ago, but Bayern did what they had to do, because a lot of teams who were in similar positions as them, look at Juventus, Real Madrid, Liverpool, they couldn't do it. But Bayern Munich, you can only play who's in front of you, you can only play your schedule, and they did, and they won the treble, and they are deserved Champions League winners because they wanted it more, and they went after it. So well done, and congratulations to Bayern Munich. And congratulations to Philippe Coutinho, because Coutinho was at a very strange and difficult time in the past 20 months or so, watching Liverpool win the Champions League after selling him, and arguably winning the Champions League because of Philippe Coutinho's sale, because that was what opened up the transfer money to buy in Fabinho and Van Dijk and Alisson. And that's what opened up Liverpool and really made them what they are now. They probably would not have won the Champions League without selling Coutinho. And then he goes to Barcelona and watches Liverpool come from behind against him. And then he's not even deemed like he's good enough at Barcelona. And so after just 18 months at Catalonia, the club already loans him out, and he's at Germany now after playing in Italy, England, Spain, and now going to Germany, and then playing well enough to get a spot off the bench against Barcelona, his parent club, in the Champions League quarterfinals, and ending up rubbing even more salt in the wounds for them by scoring a brace against his parent club. That's just a great story for Coutinho, being able to score 2 goals against his parent club, who gave up on him really too quickly, you could say, and then winning the Champions League after watching the club that sold him win it at the expense of his new club. So Coutinho, it's good to see him become a Champions League winner. That's probably the biggest trophy he's ever won in his career, so good for him. It's the end of a Champions League drought for the club, and it's Bayern Munich who are the first club ever in Champions League history to win the competition with a 100% record, winning every single game without dropping a single point. That has not been done in the tournament's history by any team. So congratulations to Bayern Munich, deserved champions of the Champions League 2019-2020. Before we move on, we should talk about PSG briefly, because there is another side to this story. While Bayern boast in their glory, PSG have to wallow in their sorrows in the fact that they blew an opportunity here. There was a window of opportunity to win the Champions League at last and complete this decade-long project of rising PSG as the top club in world football. And they made some significant strides this year, making it to their first Champions League final, finally twisting the narrative and just punishing the narrative of always being on the heartbreaking side of defeat, but finally being able to outlast the team by making a dramatic comeback, by accomplishing the same feats that other teams have done against them. Instead of conceding last-minute winners to Man United and Barcelona, or conceding massive comebacks, PSG make a comeback of their own, and they make a run into the Champions League final. But despite the strides that they made this year, and despite winning the domestic double again, it's France. That's a given. PSG are too talented not to win the double every year, and really it would be a disappointment if they didn't win anything less. But for PSG, this was their best ever chance to win the Champions League. Think about it. No Real Madrid, no Barcelona, Juventus, Man City, Liverpool. You're in the semifinals of the Champions League. Real, Barca, Juve, Man City, Liverpool, none of them are there. The only teams that stood in their way in this Portugal bubble of making it to the Champions League final and winning it were Atalanta, Leipzig, and Bayern. Now, Bayern is obviously much better than the latter. They're much better than Atalanta and Leipzig. But after getting past those two, while Bayern are the deserved winners and they are one of the best teams in the world, PSG are also very talented and they have every right to believe that they can go head-to-head with Bayern and beat them on their day. But PSG didn't do it. Their first final, but it might be their only final, because it's going to be very difficult to make it back for PSG. This was the year. The window of opportunity was wide open with all of these massive contenders and many of the holders. You have the past 5 teams that have won the Champions League all out before the semifinals. The trophy was there for the taking this year for everybody. But for PSG, they really needed to win this competition this year. And losing this final is going to be devastating for Neymar and Mbappe. And you could see what it meant to Neymar, who was in tears after this game. And it could signal that he might not be at the club much longer because he has flirted with a return to Barcelona. Now, given the state of their club, that might not happen anymore. But certainly there are a number of players that are not going to last at this club because PSG may have peaked this season. Will they make it back to the Champions League final next year? I don't think so. Because you have all of those contending clubs that are going to be much better next year already. And PSG, not to say they won't get better, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll take a step back. And it's so hard to get back to the Champions League final. No matter how good you are, no matter how great your team is, no matter how many talented players you have, getting back is just so difficult. And I don't think PSG have the mental toughness or an appropriate pool of competition to challenge them adequately enough to help them get back. This was PSG's chance. This loss is certainly going to sting PSG for a long time. But they won't be able to wallow in their sorrows for very long because Ligue 1 is already resumed. Ligue 1 restarted on Saturday, and PSG are going right back to work. Now, they'll have a slight layoff after the Champions League final, but they will be going right back into domestic football. Their league season is starting up right away. And it's certainly going to be a help for PSG that they can attempt to put this final defeat and this heartbreak behind them as soon as possible and just focus on their football and just turn their attention to next season. All right, that is it for the Champions League final. That is it for our recap. Congratulations to the new champions, Bayern Munich. Coming up after the commercial break, we're going to talk about the Champions League superlatives. And I'm going to tell you about all of the best stories from this Champions League season. Stay with us.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We're back from our commercial break. Thank you once again for joining the GSMC Soccer Podcast. We just finished our recap of the Champions League final in which Bayern defeated PSG 1-0. And now I want to broaden the spectrum a little bit. And I want to talk about the Champions League season, which has just wrapped up. And the Champions League really is the pinnacle of European football. It's really what we love to watch the most of all the domestic club seasons. It is about the European football. And I want to talk about my Champions League superlatives. Now, if you're familiar with superlatives, it's a term that goes out when you get your yearbooks in high school, when your classmates vote on certain titles or certain attributes that define students that go into the future. For example, most likely to succeed, class clown, stuff like that. So I want to do that a little bit with the Champions League season. So I'm going to tell you things like the best team, MVP, defensive player of the season, best goalkeeper, best coach, things like that. And I'm going to tell you all about my awards and superlatives for the Champions League season. So I'm going to start with my most shocking upset because, and this is specifically in terms of one team advancing over another that was completely unexpected. And there were a lot of upset stories in this Champions League season, especially in the bubble when the leagues restarted after COVID-19 broke out. But I'm going to go with Atletico Madrid knocking out Liverpool. And I'm picking Atletico Madrid over Leipzig and Lyon because Atletico Madrid knocked out the defending champions. We forget because it's been a long time since we really saw Liverpool at their shining best. But Liverpool were humming on all cylinders this season. They were top of the Premier League, undefeated in the league. Nobody could stop them. Nobody had a clue how to stand in their way. But Atletico did. And although Atletico won the first game in Madrid, going back to Anfield in the return leg, you knew Liverpool really had the advantage going into the second leg, having to come from behind from just one goal against an Atletico team that was just going to sit back and invite pressure and really let that really fast, pacey, pressuring team of Liverpool really go at them. And anything but a Liverpool win would have been shocking. And Liverpool took it to extra time. They score almost immediately into extra time. So they're winning 2-0 on the night, 2-1 in aggregate. And then out of nowhere, Atletico just steamroll Liverpool in Anfield with 3 goals, 2 from Llorente, 1 from Morata, to just knock Liverpool right off, to just steamroll them. And Liverpool had no answers. And this is a Liverpool team that was unstoppable in the Premier League. And keep in mind that before the first leg was played, Liverpool still had not suffered a single loss in the league. But once Atletico Madrid beat Liverpool, all bets were off, and Liverpool absolutely crumbled, not only in the Champions League, it also forced them to lose their first game of the domestic season, losing to Watford by 3 goals, which is a massive shock in the Premier League. And it really sent Liverpool in a massive nosedive and really stopped their peak performances in the Premier League. So my most shocking upset is Atletico Madrid beating Liverpool, who are the title holders this year. Next is my best coach of the year. My favorite coach of the year, and there are a lot of good ones here. I consider Julian Nagelsmann from Leipzig. I consider Hansi Flick from Bayern Munich, among others. But the one I'm going with is Rudy Garcia from Lyon. Now, Lyon really would not have made it as far as they did without the coaching of Rudy Garcia and the tactics that were applied in both their round of 16 and their quarterfinals against Juventus and Man City. First of all, putting tactics aside, Lyon knocked out Juventus and Manchester City, 2 teams that many pegged as favorites to win this competition outright. And Lyon said, well, no. Lyon went off script and knocked them both out. Which is absolutely shocking. But you have to credit the manager, Rudy Garcia, for how he set up his team. In the Man City game, I'm going to use that as the primary example because that was the really shining example of how Lyon were able to best Manchester City and really shock the world and how they were able to just be a fairy tale story. It was in the sense that Lyon were able to adapt on the fly, and they were able to have one game plan and then shift to another based on the scoring that was happening in the game. Lyon were pressuring Manchester City. They were pressing their forwards high up the pitch. They were forcing mistakes from the center backs, and then one through ball later, Lyon were already through on goal, and it ended up being 1-0 for Lyon. And then when Manchester City started pressuring Lyon and going on the attack and being very aggressive, Lyon were able to sit back most of the team while the forwards pressured the back line, and that ended up catering to Lyon very well, and ended up helping Lyon score 3 goals against Manchester City and delivering some knockout blows against them and knocking them out of the quarterfinals for the 4th straight season. And in terms of his tactics for Lyon, Rudy Garcia really set his team up well, and he also was able to keep the game against Bayern very close, only a 2-0 defeat. And Lyon had some great chances in that game. Bayern Munich, they were a decent shot on target away from losing that game. I'm not suggesting that Lyon were unlucky not to win, because Bayern were the more dominant team and they did control the game throughout. But we're forgetting that Lyon did test goal a few times, that Lyon had a few spells of possession that threatened Bayern Munich, that Lyon was pressuring Bayern's high line, and that Lyon wasn't just slouching around. Lyon was giving it their all. And Rudy Garcia deserves a whole lot of credit for how he was able to drag Lyon all the way to the semifinals of the Champions League for the first time in 10 years. Lyon in the Champions League semifinals. And frankly, I have to say I'm shocked that a coach like Rudy Garcia isn't really pegged as a top manager around the world. For example, why didn't Barcelona give an ounce of consideration to Rudy Garcia before they pulled the trigger on Ronald Koeman instead? Do you know how inspiring a Rudy Garcia appointment would have been? It would have been a massive appointment, and it really would have been a great one. And I think Rudy Garcia has the awareness and the adaptability and the experience to really be a great leader, a great manager. He makes players better, he coaches well, and at a club like Lyon, where you can't just bring in whoever you want, you can't be a checkbook manager, he was able to beat the most expensive team in the world in Manchester City, a team that spends more on most countries that they spend on their militaries, on their defense and their attacks, and Lyon were able to knock them out with not a lot of spending in their budget at all. So best coach of the year, best coach of the Champions League season, Rudy Garcia for Lyon. Next, defensive player of the year. I am going to go with Dayot Upamecano, the Leipzig center back, the French 21-year-old, who was really the catalyst and the leader and the face of Leipzig's defensive performance against Atletico Madrid in the quarterfinals. It was Upamecano who really was so stout in that game, that really was the face of Leipzig's deep run into the semifinals of the Champions League. We forget, Timo Werner did not play a single part in their knockout stage run. Now, he played in the round of 16 against Spurs, and they were able to handle Spurs well with Werner in the side. But beyond that, from the quarters on, when they played Atletico and they played PSG, Timo Werner was not a non-factor. He did not play. He was in London preparing to become a Blue, preparing to play for Chelsea next season. And so Leipzig had to do it without their best player, and they had to do it against the likes of Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria, and Atletico they had to play Diego Costa, Morata, and João Felix. And in the Atletico game, only giving up a penalty to João Felix, and Upamecano stifling everything in front of him. And now he's in contention for a move to Real Madrid, which makes all the sense in the world for Upamecano and the club, considering the ages of the center backs in Madrid, considering the mistakes that we've seen from Varane in the round of 16, considering Nacho is about to leave the club. Upamecano has a big money move on his resume coming this summer, and you have to say it is time for him, considering how he stifled all opposing attacks during the Champions League campaign this year. And he was the face of Leipzig's deep run, and he is a great defender. He made every single tackle. He was successful in 100% of his tackles against Atletico, stifling everything. Class defender, underrated, but soon everyone will know his name. Next, I'm going to tell you best goalkeeper. Now, this won't be too shocking, but I have pegged Manuel Neuer as my best goalkeeper of the season. Manuel Neuer is 34 years old, so his age is really sneaking up on us, and Neuer is very close to the end of his career, and at least he will be to the end of his Bayern career, assuming he doesn't play for much longer or doesn't play into the years that Buffon has, say. But for Manuel Neuer, throughout his whole career, he has been one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And a few years ago, he was really struggling to stay fit. He was having loads of injury problems. He had a bad World Cup in Russia, and it was a big part of why Germany was knocked out so early in the competition in the group stage. And he was becoming the face of Bayern's struggles, playing way too far out in front and getting caught out by Sadio Mane and Heung-min Son. And Manuel Neuer, while he wasn't the exclusive reason for Bayern winning the treble this year, and he didn't have to stand on his face making 10 saves a game to keep Bayern winning all the time. He just had so many clean sheets this year. He kept everything in front of him. He made saves when he had to, when he was the last line of defense, when his number was called, when he was being counted on, he was able to deliver. And he made saves. In the PSG game, in the final, he wasn't tested a lot, and the quality of the shots that he had was not super high. He still made the saves when they counted. And that's what you need from your goalkeeper. You don't need your goalkeeper to play miraculously every single game. You need them to make the saves they're supposed to make, and then make maybe 2 or 3 saves they're not supposed to. And that's what Manuel Neuer does. And that's what he's done his entire career. He's let his cheekiness and his desire to go forward really get in the way of that in recent years, and his fitness has stood in the way. But on his day, and this season, 34-year-old Manuel Neuer is still one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Might not be the best goalkeeper in the world this season, but he was the best goalkeeper in the Champions League this year, especially from the quarterfinals onward. So best goalkeeper goes to Manuel Neuer. Next, I will tell you my best team. Now, this really is a formality. You might think that it's silly for me to even consider this and to even ponder doing this part of the segment, but for my best team, it has to be the champions. It has to be Bayern Munich. And it's an easy choice, not just the attribute that they've won the Champions League, they won the tournament, they're the best team. It's as easy as that. It's not always as easy as that, because the best team doesn't always go on to win the competition. That's one thing that I've learned as a sports fan, not just as a soccer fan, not just watching the Champions League. In any competition, the best team doesn't always win. And Bayern Munich, for a long time, have always had a loaded roster. They've always been one of the best teams in the world, but they've never been the best. And they've always lost to European titans, and they've always lost to the teams who ended up winning the competition. But finally, Bayern Munich were able to get over the line, get over the hump, and it really is due to how stacked their roster is. Like I talked about in the first segment, Manuel Neuer, who's playing better than ever at 34 years old. You have Alphonso Davies and Joshua Kimmich dominating the flanks, defending well, keeping everything in front of them. And when they go forward, Kimmich delivering in dimes on crosses, and Alphonso Davies outwitting defenders left, right, and center, and sending long balls and just outrunning everybody, and just having fun with Nelson Semedo and just going around him all night long. The midfield, Thiago, Goretzka bossing it on. Then you have Thomas Muller, who had a career resurgence and had 21 assists. He had as many assists in the Bundesliga this year as Messi did in La Liga, and Muller played in 4 fewer games than Lionel Messi. And of course, on the wings, you also have Coutinho and Barisic and Gnabry and Coman, and only 2 of them could start every game. So you have 2 of those players on the bench every game, which is great depth. And then you have Robert Lewandowski, who isn't the best number 9 in the world. He's one of the best players in the world, and when you need him to score the goals at the crucial moments, he delivers every single time. Robert Lewandowski leading the team, being the talisman. And that is going to pivot me over to my most valuable player award, and of course it has to be Robert Lewandowski. And like I talked about a few shows ago, if the Ballon d'Or award was still being given out this year, there's no doubt that Robert Lewandowski would be the player to receive the most prestigious individual honor in our sport. Robert Lewandowski scored 55 goals in all competitions this year. 55 goals in all comps. 15 in the Champions League. So for the tournament, obviously, he was the most prolific goal scorer, and that's really going to be the big reason why he is going to be my most valuable player. He just scores goals. Now, while he didn't do it in the final, he hit the post against PSG in the final. Lewandowski was a walking goal. He was as clinical as ever in his career. And Lewandowski, who was a player who was always considered one of the best number 9s in the world, and many pegged him as the best, but this year he took a step from great player to one of the best players in the world. Maybe the best in the world right now. You can make that argument. Messi and Ronaldo are certainly in that conversation, but right now Lewandowski is also in that conversation. Today, this year, Lewandowski has inserted himself in the conversation for best player in the world, and this year he made his case with how he carried Bayern to the Champions League final and being the face of their goal-scoring machine this year. Robert Lewandowski, player of the year for the Champions League, most valuable player in the world. Now before I go, I just want to wrap up with my best fairy tale story. Now although MVP is usually how you end it, I do want to make sure I give some attention to my fairy tale story. Now I talk a lot about underdog stories, and this Champions League season gave us so many of them. You have two semifinalists in Lyon and Leipzig who we did not expect to make it that far, that we never would have expected to make it that far. But I am going to pick for my fairy tale story, my most appreciated fairy tale story, as Atalanta, the team from Italy making their Champions League debut this season, being 5 minutes away from a semi-final, 5 minutes away from defeating PSG, and ending up faltering at the end to PSG on 2 goals in stoppage time. But Atalanta, despite their heartbreaking defeat to PSG, really are a beloved story that should be told for the rest of time, making their Champions League debut during the season of COVID-19, in which their small town of Bergamo was the hardest hit in Italy by COVID-19. It was the first city to have to shut down and quarantine in Italy, and they had players and coaches test positive for the virus. They had thousands of Italians in the city die. Atalanta had a purpose to play for. They weren't just playing for fun. They weren't just playing to just make it deep in the tournament and make a deep run and have some fun. Atalanta were playing to put a smile on the citizens of Bergamo and to distract them from the deaths that COVID-19 has brought upon them. And they played such an entertaining form of football. Atalanta, despite being a very small club and making their Champions League debut, and despite coming from losing their first 3 group games in the Champions League and ended up making a Champions League knockout stage berth, beating Valencia, they played a style that was easy on the eye. They're not a team like Atletico Madrid or some Karabag side that is just going to sit back and invite pressure and just try to defend for 90 minutes and maybe go to penalties in a knockout stage game. Atalanta, they had the talent to do it, but they also have the mindset and the philosophy to take the game to another team. They had PSG on the ropes. PSG, a Champions League finalist this year. PSG were on the ropes to Atalanta, and if not for 2 miraculous stoppage time goals, and if not for one of the most dramatic finishes in football history, Atalanta would have been in a Champions League semi-final, maybe even further if the draw went their way and if they played well against Leipzig in that semi-final. This team is so fun to watch, and their story is so enticing that Atalanta was such a wonderful story to watch this year, and Atalanta is my best fairy tale story of the season. And luckily, we will see them again next year. They clinched 3rd place in Serie A for the 2nd straight season, so we will see more of Atalanta in the Champions League next season, which is great to see. Okay, that is it for my Champions League superlatives, and that is it. That is a wrap for this season's Champions League season, and I cannot wait to talk about it more with you when the Champions League returns next month. That is all for this segment. Coming up after the break, we are going to revisit Barcelona and talk about the state of the club in the Camp Nou. Don't go anywhere.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
We are back from our commercial break, sponsored by the GSMC Soccer Podcast. We're going to talk about Barcelona. And we've been talking about them a lot, and for good reason, because this club is in a state of crisis. And whenever a big club like Barcelona is in crisis, it could signal a very dark future for the state of this club. And it's important that we talk about what could be in for the future for this club, considering that the state is so dire that you have a great player like Lionel Messi, who has made it clear he is considering an exit from the Camp Nou. For the first time, really, in his career, he's giving serious thought to a move outside of the Camp Nou. And part of it is because of the 8-2 loss to Bayern Munich. No loss has really inked a stamp on the fall of a club like that in a very, very long time. Barcelona hasn't lost like that in many years. Barcelona of the 21st century has been known as a titan of European football, a team that takes the game to everybody else, a team that blows out other teams by 6 goals, a team that scores 8 goals on other teams. But this Barcelona is not the one that we know and love, or the one that we know and respect if you're not a Barcelona fan for many years. But it's been a long time in the making, this fall of such a great club. You can go all the way back to the last time they won the Champions League, which is 2015. That's a long time ago. That team, although Messi was at his peak, you also had players like Neymar and Suarez paired up with him to make the famous MSN trident up top for Barcelona, which caused havoc across the world for so many years in Barcelona. You also had players like Ivan Rakitic and Andres Iniesta and Xavi, who were bossing the midfield. The defense was much better back then. Piqué was at the top of his game. You also had Javier Mascherano, who knew how to play center back and really defend and keep everything in front of Barcelona's defense. And Marc-Andre ter Stegen, obviously, who's still there, who also was turning into a very promising goalkeeper. And they were led by Luis Enrique. And although Barcelona did have their problems with Luis Enrique, and he did leave mutually pretty much, it was a mutual agreement pretty much for Enrique and Barcelona to part ways. But despite that, Luis Enrique, a coach like him, would probably be a great fit for Barcelona at this point to lead them into another era of their club. With Ronald Koeman, who has already been announced as manager, it really signals the disparity in class that this club has had from one generation of a team to another. And it's only been 5 years, but just look at the disparity in the players and the starting 11s. You have players still there like Suarez, Messi, ter Stegen, Rakitic, Piqué, but the surrounding cast, first of all, the players that are still there, apart from Messi and ter Stegen, you've had a massive drop-off from players like Suarez. Now, Suarez is still a very good player, but he's 33 years old now. He's had his fair share of injury problems, and this season he really missed a lot of important games down the stretch because he was too hurt to play. He wasn't fit enough. You have players like Rakitic, who is really struggling to find his way right now, really wondering if he even knows how to kick a ball sometimes. You have Piqué, who's lost his legs, and really, one-on-one, when he's just doing basic marking and defending, he's totally out of his depth as a defender at any club, at any level. And then you have Busquets, who's been playing for 100 years, and he has no legs left to keep up with the pace of Alphonso Davies and Kimmich and Goretzka and Sané in the midfield, the players that played for Bayern Munich against Barcelona, really tore them to shreds. And it really goes down to the team for not being able to revitalize the squad, for not making them younger, just growing older every single season. And it's not just the players, because it goes down to coaching as well. It goes down to upper management. It goes down to the club for sacking Ernesto Valverde in January after really, well, at the time of Valverde's sacking, they were first place in La Liga. Now, you could argue whether Valverde should have been sacked or not. Personally, I thought Valverde's sacking was a good decision, although I think the timing was way off. I think Valverde should have been sacked after last season, following the 4-0 defeat to Liverpool when they saw a 3-goal lead in the Champions League semifinals crumble in front of their eyes as Liverpool stole their spot in the Champions League final. That should have been Valverde's ticket out of Barcelona, but it was not, and they held on to him too long, and the timing wasn't right, but they knew they had to get rid of him, so they got rid of him much too soon back in January. And then you had Xavi, who was the number one choice for this club to take over, but he wasn't comfortable with the state of the club yet. He could see the crisis looming, and he didn't want any part of it. He didn't also want a part of working with the board or Josep Bartomeu, the club president. So they were stuck with Quique Setién, and then after a tumultuous 250-something days, they sack him, and now Xavi still doesn't want to go back. Barcelona don't even consider managers like Allegri and Pochettino or Inzaghi, and they just go with Ronald Koeman, who is one of the least inspiring appointments for a club like Barcelona in a long time. Because it doesn't matter. Like I said in the last show, if Ronald Koeman was not a former player, then Barcelona would have not given an ounce of consideration towards him. Because in his playing day, he was very good. He was the Sergio Ramos before Sergio Ramos. He was a prolific defender, he locked things up at the back, and he knew how to score goals on set pieces. And that's really a valuable asset, and that won Barcelona the Champions League. In 1993, he scored the game winner in the Champions League final against Sampdoria, and it won Barcelona their first ever European crown. And part of that is why he's manager. And his experience does not speak for itself at all. You look at the clubs he's managed, he's been around, he's a 57-year-old journeyman, but the clubs he's managed are not at the level of Barcelona. Ajax, Feyenoord, PSV, Valencia, Southampton, Everton. His best achievement is finishing 6th place with Southampton. That's great. But that's it. That's all he's done. That is the most significant attribute of his managerial career for his resume. And that is not enough for Football Club Barcelona to come and say, we don't need to evaluate any other competition. We don't need to evaluate any other coaches on the market. You are the guy for us. Not to mention he was already the manager of the Netherlands. Not to mention that Barcelona only took about 48 hours to determine that Koeman was the manager for them. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't understand why these clubs, not just Barcelona, because Juventus did it too when they sacked Maurizio Sarri and appointed Andrea Pirlo. It doesn't make any sense why these big clubs are so eager to pull the trigger so quickly. Why was Barcelona so rushed to get Koeman's signature as the coach? Because it's not like anybody else was vying for his signature. He already had a job with the Netherlands, but he already turned down this position a few months ago, and he's clearly not qualified. So what are they doing going after him again? It doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, when Barcelona comes calling, it's hard for anyone to say no. Koeman said no before with the Euros looming, and now that it's August and the Euros have been postponed to even longer, now Koeman has accepted the job, not without compensation, because Barcelona did have to forfeit 5 million euros to the Dutch Federation just to acquire his services, which is another shambolic part on the part of Barcelona. Koeman has really caused Barcelona a lot of headaches just to get him in the building. And he's in the building. And he's not going to do much. He's not going to inspire. Like I said before, this is far from an inspiring appointment. If you're Lionel Messi, you don't respect Ronald Koeman. You won't talk to him. You won't listen to him. Last year with Quique Setién, after that 250-day period where he was the manager, it was a disaster. And Messi locked horns with Setién. Messi is one of the most quiet players in the world. Messi, he lets his game speak for itself. He doesn't vocalize his thoughts in the press. He doesn't throw his teammates under the bus. He doesn't say anything that's going to cause a media stir. He doesn't say anything. He keeps his mouth shut. He goes out and does his business, lets his football do the talking. But when Messi criticizes a coach or teammate, then you know that there's a problem because he never says anything. And with Messi, he finally spoke up with Setien, and not directly jabbing Setien per se, but talking about how the culture of the club is not what it used to be, and how the Barcelona side that couldn't beat Osasuna in the penultimate game of the season with La Liga on the line, with Real Madrid ending up clinching the title because Barcelona weren't good enough on the day to beat Osasuna, said that this team wouldn't be good enough to beat Napoli in the round of 16. And they did beat Napoli in the round of 16, but that was the last victory they saw this year. And then they got utterly destroyed by the Bavarians in Lisbon. Messi had things to say. He said that this team was going in the wrong direction. Setien wasn't happy. Setien felt undermined by Messi, felt that his authority was being diminished as the manager of Barcelona. And obviously, in any battle between Messi and a manager, Messi will triumph every time. Not because Messi is going to make his case and go out of his way to make sure that a manager that he's not pleased with gets sacked. But with Messi, if Messi's not happy and the manager's not happy, most of the time, the manager is the one that gets his exit. It's not Messi. Messi is never the one who will leave. He's never the one that is forced out so a manager can stay put. Now let's pivot back to this year with Ronald Koeman, who was appointed last week, who is as underwhelming a hire I've ever seen. And like I said, Messi will not respect him. Messi does not respect him. At least when Real Madrid hired Zinedine Zidane, Ronaldo, who was coming off of a tenure with Rafa Benitez, which failed miserably, and the team didn't respect Rafa, you hire Zidane, who, while lacking in managerial experience, he makes up for in his namesake, his playing career, because he was one of the greatest midfielders the world has ever seen. So Ronaldo will talk to Zidane. He will respect him. He'll listen to him. With Juventus, same player, Cristiano Ronaldo. Now they hire Andrea Pirlo to replace Maurizio Sarri, who really didn't have the locker room all season. And Andrea Pirlo can talk to Cristiano Ronaldo. And Ronaldo will respect him, and Ronaldo will listen to him, and he will listen to his tactics. While he lacks in managerial experience or savviness, he knows what he's doing. Maybe not at the coaching level, but he's been in Ronaldo's shoes. He's played with Juventus, and he knows, he has an idea, he has a vision of where this club can go in the future. But with Ronald Koeman, even though he's a former player, nobody considers Ronald Koeman one of the best players in world football in the game's history. Nobody thinks that. I don't even think he's one of the best players in Barcelona history. When you consider the all-time great Catalans who played for this team, Koeman doesn't come up. He was a very good player, but his name and his legacy doesn't live on in the club like others do. His name doesn't live on like others do from his era. He was okay. As a manager, he's been pretty poor. He's been average at best at times. He's been around so much. You can attribute his journeyman status as a manager to how he's really crashed and burned at some other clubs. And like I said, I'm not diminishing his accomplishments because he does have a few accomplishments. He finished 6th with Southampton. He finished 7th with Everton the next year. He did good stuff with Ajax and Feyenoord and PSV in his time in the Netherlands. He got the Netherlands to a UEFA Nations League final last year, although you can attribute that to a golden generation in the making for the Netherlands. But Ronald Koeman is not the man for the job. He is totally out of his depth at this club. And pertaining to the future, the short-term future, the immediate future of Barcelona, Koeman, his first task was to convince 33-year-old Lionel Messi to stay. To convince Messi that this is worth sticking around for, that Koeman has a good vision for the future, that Koeman's project at Catalonia is worth staying for and worth fighting for. And so they had a meeting, Messi and Koeman, just one-on-one. Messi even cut his holiday short just to meet with Koeman directly so that Messi could get a feel for what Koeman's future and what his vision is like. and to stay his ambitions, and for Messi just to get a feel for it. And Messi in that meeting has directly told Koeman that he has doubts and the club's future, and he wants out. Messi wants out. He is more likely to leave than to stay, is what he told Koeman, and that's what reports have been saying about this meeting. Although he's under contract for one more season, which in itself is shambolic, that Barcelona haven't even signed Messi long-term enough that one of the best player in the club's history, maybe the best player that has ever lived, is 12 months away from leaving, and Barcelona will get not a dime for it. That in itself is utterly shambolic, and it's embarrassing for a club like this that Messi is so close to seeing out his contract that he could literally just sit put, not hold a pen for 12 months, and he can leave and go wherever he wants, and Barcelona gets zero compensation for it. Now, it's unlikely that he will be able to leave this summer because Barcelona have stated that, and Bartomeu has affirmed, that Messi is not for sale. They have listed 5 players that they insist on keeping that are unsellable, and they've been deemed unsellable by the coach, board, and the president. And Messi is one of them. And it's hard to fault them for putting Messi on their list because he is unsellable. He is the best player in the world. He's as indispensable as they come. But they said that if Messi, or if a club wants Messi services to pull him out of Catalonia, that they will have to meet the 700 million euro release clause that's in Messi's contract. And obviously, the world record transfer right now is Neymar's transfer to PSG for 230 million euros, and no one's come close to that since in the 3 years since Neymar's transfer to PSG. So it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be mission impossible for any team to have that much money to afford Messi. And that's why it's more likely that Messi would leave after his contract expires for free. Because no club has the wages. No club has that amount of money. You could say Man United, PSG, Man City. They have money. They're rich. They're loaded. But they're not that loaded. They'd have to sell all of their best players to even get a first bid at Lionel Messi. So it would be very impossible. I think it's impossible. Now, we've seen stranger things happen. I thought Neymar's transfer to PSG would be impossible, but clearly it was not, and it happened. But we'll have to see how this transpires in terms of if it happens this summer or next summer. But point being, Messi is not staying. Messi is going to leave Barcelona sooner rather than later, and it's only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. Which is very unfortunate, because like I said last show, Messi and Barcelona are synonymous. This was his boyhood club. This was the club that came to his rescue and paid for his medication so that he could have human growth hormone so that he could grow and that his height wasn't at a disadvantage anymore. This is the team that pulled him in out of Argentina so that he could come to live in Barcelona, that he could live in the city, that he could play for this club and one day be their star, be their number 10. And that's what he was. And he's never considered leaving. He's been at this club since he was 13 years old, but 20 years later, he's seeing the writing on the wall that this club is spiraling into utter chaos, and he, rightly so, wants no part of it. And also, he's been feeling a little betrayed and backstabbed by the board. Messi's even more upset that the press has leaked this information about this one-on-one meeting to the public. It was a private meeting, no one else was there, and nonetheless, the board, the president, they're leaking this to the press, and the public is hearing this, and Messi is infuriated about it. Messi has spoken out year after year about the necessity of winning the Champions League. Last year, when he acquired the captaincy from Andres Iniesta, he spoke to the fans at the Camp Nou saying that we will win the Champions League. The Champions League is coming back to the Camp Nou. And they were close. They were a game away from the final, 3 goals ahead of Liverpool, and obviously they crumbled in that. And Barcelona, in the past 5 years that they have not won the Champions League, have crumbled every single year in the quarters and the semis, each campaign more deflating than the last, suffering heartbreaking, catastrophic losses. And in this case with Messi, he has stated how he wants to leave, and there are clubs that are out for his signature. There are clubs that are monitoring this situation. The top 3 clubs in this, top 4 I should say, Inter Milan, PSG, Juventus, and Manchester City are all closely monitoring all of this. PSG's president Nasser Al-Khelaifi says he would love to pair Messi back with Neymar and tag those two with Mbappe. And well, let's be frank, who wouldn't? That would be the stuff of dreams, watching those three play together in real life. But besides that, Juventus have been seeking it, and they sought out Ronaldo, and they capitalized on what looked like a very unrealistic transfer, but they paid the money that Real wanted, and they got Ronaldo in. But considering how heavy their wage books are right now, Juventus can't really afford to have Messi on the books as well. So that seems like a very long shot. Inter Milan have always considered and have always explored the idea of bringing Messi in, and that would be very cool to see Inter and Juventus renew the Messi-Ronaldo rivalry. But again, that's a long shot. That is something that we probably will not see. And Manchester City would be the most romantic of the options because it would be a reunion with Pep Guardiola, and it would be Messi's best chance at winning another Champions League before he hangs up his cleats for good. Because Pep Guardiola really brought out the best in Messi, and he was really the catalyst for his development into a good player to a great player. And they won 2 trebles together in Catalonia. They were a match made in heaven, and it would be great to see them back together. Pep has said it, Messi has said it, and Messi even considered leaving Barcelona back in 2017 to go to Manchester City and join Pep Guardiola's project in Manchester. So that could happen. But probably not this summer, because Manchester City, even though they have all the money in the world, they don't have 700 million euros that they can spend right now on Lionel Messi. But Barca insists Messi's not for sale, citing sporting and commercial reasons. They don't want to lose their best player. They don't want to lose the commercial value brand that Messi brings. But we'll have to see what happens. But Barcelona is in a state of shambles, and you know that because Messi has advocated for his own exit out of this club. And with La Liga starting up in just over 3 weeks, Barcelona is going to take some careful monitoring to see how this crisis develops and what the latest is on Ronald Koeman and Lionel Messi. That is it for this segment. Coming up after the break, it's our final segment. We're going to talk about the latest transfer rumors circling across the world. Don't go anywhere.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. Our last commercial break is over, and we're going to move on to our final segment. And as always, it's going to be the transfer market. It is August 24th, and there are so many transfers in the world to talk about. We have so many rumors, stories, deals that have been done that we need to touch on today that have changed since the last time I talked to you all. So, I know we talked about Barcelona in the last segment, but we're going to revisit them just for a little bit to talk about their transfers and the players that are rumored and linked to other clubs. So briefly, Luis Suarez, one of Barcelona's most prolific strikers in their history, the Uruguayan 33-year-old, has a contract until 2021, so one more full season on his contract. Luis Suarez is not one of the players that Barcelona has listed as indispensable or unsellable. Luis Suarez is not necessarily a must-keep. He is not viewed by Koeman or the board as a player that must remain in the club. And he's been linked with Ajax, his club in the Netherlands, before his move to Liverpool. But Luis Suarez has advocated he doesn't want to go anywhere. Luis Suarez loves Barcelona. He's been there. He's already been there for 6 seasons, playing with Messi. He loves it there. He feels like he belongs there. So he's desperate to stay. And he knows that he is in the twilight of his career. He is in the wrong side of 30. And he's accepted that he's not considered indispensable anymore. He is not one of the best strikers in the world anymore. And he has said that he wants to fight for his future at the Camp Nou. He's willing to compete for the starting number 9. He's willing to stay and fight and claw to keep his spot, but he doesn't want to go anywhere. He's willing to even accept a backup role if he doesn't even win the number 9 starting position. If Griezmann wins the striker position and Luis Suarez doesn't, Luis Suarez still wants to stay. He's willing to accept a backup role with the club as long as he can stay in Barcelona. He believes he still has plenty to give, but he is willing to take a step back in his career to stay in Barcelona to compete for a starting spot. Ivan Rakitic, meanwhile, has been linked with a move to Spurs. The 32-year-old Croatian has been allowed to leave the Camp Nou. He is also not one of Barcelona's coveted assets, and Spurs have been tracking him. Now, Ivan Rakitic has been linked with a transfer for many years, and Rakitic has been aware that he's been linked to other clubs, and he said that his number one choice to go would be Sevilla, because that was the club that he played for before Barcelona. It's where he won the Europa League. It's where he won Man of the Match. Right before his big money move to Catalonia, he has advocated that if he would transfer out of Barcelona, he would return to Sevilla, where he was so happy, where his football was great, he was enjoying himself. He would love to return. Although Sevilla have been linked a little bit, Spurs seem to be one of the favorites right now to ink Ivan Rakitic's signature. Now, in terms of signings that Barcelona could make this summer, Ronald Koeman has already advocated for some of his countrymen to join Barcelona, including Jorginho Wijnaldum and Memphis Depay. Now, with Wijnaldum, the midfielder at Liverpool, Ronald Koeman has told Wijnaldum directly that he has told Wijnaldum, not to extend at Liverpool with his contract expiring in a year or two. Wijnaldum has been told not to renew, to wait out for Barcelona to make a bid with Wijnaldum to potentially be brought into Barcelona. Meanwhile, Memphis Depay is rated at 30 million euros by Lyon. He's 26 years old. He's looking to move on after 4 years in France after a failure in Manchester United in 2015. It's time for Memphis Depay to join another club, and Memphis Depay thinks that Ronald Koeman believes that Depay would thrive in Catalonia. And it seems a little fitting that Ronald Koeman, who was the Dutch national team manager, is seeking to bring in his countrymen to revitalize this Barcelona team to really pursue his project as manager of Barcelona. Although this may show a very unfortunate pattern for the club because Ronald Koeman is Dutch, Depay and Wijnaldum are Dutch. You have to wonder, is Koeman just going to try and seek the whole Dutch national team? Because that is not how you make the club better. And sure, the Dutch national team has a lot of great players and a lot of young studs. Although Wijnaldum is approaching 30, Depay is 26. Barcelona is not going to fix their problems. They're not going to enter another era of glory and championships by just signing every Dutch player that Koeman has ever coached. So if that's the transfer policy, then this thing is going to blow up for Barcelona. And it's really concerning already seeing Koeman just pursue his Dutch players, even though he was the manager of the Dutch national team. It's one thing having continuity. It's one thing having players that have played into your system and spread the word of your system. But this is Barcelona. This is not the Dutch national team. So hopefully, for the club's sake, Koeman doesn't just bring in every Dutch player that he's ever managed, because Barcelona need much more than players that know Ronald Koeman's system, a manager who might not even see the end of the season if Barcelona falter during the season. Moving on, let's talk about another club entering a period of transition, and that will be Juventus. The Turin side have already terminated 2 contracts of 2 veterans that have really defined this era of Juventus, and that would be Gonzalo Higuain and Sami Khedira. Two players that have really lost their legs a bit, that don't really have a place at this club anymore, and are not in the vision of Andrea Pirlo, the new Juventus manager. So their contracts have already been terminated instead of even exploring a possible transfer to bring in money for the club. But both players on high wages, Khedira on a free transfer, and Gonzalo Higuain in a big blockbuster transfer from Napoli just a few years ago. So with Juventus, they've already terminated the contracts of 2 top veterans that have played for this club for many years. Now, Pirlo is already busy exploring possible signings that Juventus could make, and that would include a possible player swap with Arsenal. They are exploring a player swap in which Arsenal would give Juventus Alexander Lacazette, and Juventus would hand over Federico Bernardeschi over to Arsenal. Now, Juventus's top target to replace Higuain at striker has not been Lacazette, but it's been Raul Jimenez, the Mexican striker who plays for Wolves in the Premier League. But Juventus are not the only club that are vying for his signature. Pretty much everybody and their brother in Europe is vying for Raul Jimenez. And so Juventus are exploring Alexander Lacazette as an alternative, as a better option really for Juventus to pursue. And a straight swap with Bernardeschi and Lacazette could be very likely, and it may just happen. Arsenal view Lacazette as a surplus to requirements at Arsenal, despite the partnership and the chemistry and like the brotherhood type of dynamic that Lacazette and Aubameyang have with each other. Aubameyang is really viewed as the top option to Arsenal. He's already signed to a contract extension with the club, and Lacazette is really viewed as surplus, as heavyweight, and so they're looking to get rid of him and to offload his wages and to get a transfer fee in for him. And for Bernardeschi, Arsenal view Bernardeschi as a perfect addition to revitalize the midfield and the right wing, especially with the departure of Dani Ceballos, who has been recalled from his loan to Real Madrid. For another possible departure from Juventus, Pirlo has put Alexandro on the market, the 29-year-old Brazilian left-back, and one of the best players that Juventus has had really in the past decade. Andrea Pirlo wants players that suit his playing style. What that playing style is really to be determined, because Andrea Pirlo has not coached a game in his life, and Alexandro is one of the best left-backs on the planet. And so with Alexandro possibly leaving, it's going to leave a big hole at left back for Juventus to fill. Now, an offer that Juventus are considering would be for 40 million euros, and that is what Juventus currently value him at. Although Juventus have really valued him higher, much more in the past, with Alexandro wanted and being pursued by clubs like Manchester City in the past, and Juventus holding off offers of upwards of 60, 70 million euros. But Juventus are only putting him on the market for 40. So that would be a really great bargain for any top club in Europe looking for a left back. Now, let's revisit Jadon Sancho, who has been one of the best, most intriguing transfer sagas of the summer. This story has really been quiet for about a week now. There has not been an update to tell you about, but he hasn't spoken much. Sancho, the player, hasn't spoken much about a possible move. But he did give an interview with Soccer Bible earlier in the week, and this is what he said. I try not to look at the media, because I think once you start looking at all that, it would be easy to get carried away with it. It can affect players. For me, it's about not looking at those things and just focusing on trying to do the best I can on the pitch, especially in training. For me, it's about improving every single day. It's important for me to keep a smile on my face and keep happy. I don't really look at all the noise and all that stuff. I'd rather keep my head down, keep focused, and improve every day. And for Sancho, that's a great mindset to have. To just focus on your football, not really say anything in the press, not try to push a move, not try to force anyone's hand, not put his parent club, Dortmund, at a very disadvantageous position by saying something that the club would regret him saying. So that's admirable from a very young player who is really who really has the world as his oyster at this point, that he could go anywhere he wants in the world, and him keeping quiet, him keeping his head down is really the best thing that this club could have. And as far as Dortmund is concerned, Sancho is staying at the club, because we've talked about this in previous podcasts. Man United had a deadline that Dortmund set for them to agree to their 120 million evaluation for Sancho, which Man United have consistently fallen short of. And so Dortmund have locked the door on a possible signing for Sancho to move out of Dortmund to go to Manchester this summer. Although if Man U do come up with the 120 million euros that Dortmund are seeking, then Dortmund would give him over. But for anything less, the door has been shut for negotiations. It is now pay up or go home for Manchester United as far as Dortmund is concerned. Moving on, let's talk about a manager. Antonio Conte has been linked to possibly leaving Inter this summer. Inter are coming off a very heartbreaking loss in the Europa League final to Sevilla, who lifted their sixth crown in the Europa League. Antonio Conte said outright, "I'm not sure that I'll be the Inter manager next season. We'll decide together. Inter will plan the future with or without me." Now, from that quote alone, I would say that it's more likely that Conte leaves than he stays, because that statement really sounds like he wants to leave. It doesn't sound like his heart is in Milan. It doesn't sound like he wants to stay. But it's hard to determine why Conte wants out, considering that Inter, or at least why Inter would want him out, why Inter would be pushing him out of the club, why Inter would say, yeah, Antonio Conte, you did us good, but it's time to move on. Goodbye, see you later, thank you for everything. I don't think Inter would be smart to do that, and I think this is a good match that you should try out for at least another year, especially with the way Serie A is looking next year, with Juventus entering a virtual rebuild. This could be Inter's year to finally win the Scudetto and to win their first title in 9 years. They won the Treble in 2010, they won a Coppa Italia in 2011. Ever since, they have been starved of any silverware in their history. Antonio Conte and Inter would be a good match to keep exploring, to keep trying out, because Antonio Conte is a great manager. He's had so much success at Chelsea, at Juventus with the Italian national team, and Inter really closed the gap on Juve this season. Inter they finished in second in Serie A this year by 1 point. 1 point separated Juventus, the nine-time Italian champions, from Inter Milan this season. And so Inter, if they keep Conte, if they retool this team instead of doing another rebuild, instead of selling all their best players, then Inter could finally close the gap and maybe even win a Scudetto for the first time in 10 years. Speaking of Inter, let's talk about Lautaro Martinez, the prolific young 22-year-old striker from Argentina, and the Inter number 10 has been linked with a move to Manchester City. Pep Guardiola has wanted to pry Lautaro Martinez out of Milan for a long time, and they're looking to really replace Sergio Aguero at the striker position for Manchester City, with Aguero entering the twilight of his career and his retirement on the horizon. Now, in terms of strikers, Pep Guardiola has long advocated for the club to pry Harry Kane out of Tottenham, although Harry Kane is much more expensive, and it's been very difficult to pry Harry out of Manchester, and so they're really turning their attention over to Martinez. Now, Martinez has had a release clause of 111 million euros, which is really not that high of a figure when you consider all the best players out there and the players that have the highest ceilings and the highest promise. But that release clause has since expired since last month. But City will probably still be able to afford whatever figure Inter desires, but they'll still need to sell some players to even leave room for that, because Manchester City have been out for a lot of players this summer. They've already signed Nathan Ake from Bournemouth, and they've already signed Ferran Torres from Valencia. So they've already spent about 60 million, and so they're going to have to spend about 120 on Lautaro probably for Inter. And so they're going to have to offload some players and make some sales before they can even consider, or they can even come up with the money that Inter want, because Inter are happy to keep Lautaro Martinez with the Scudetto wide open next year. They're going to want to be as strong as ever, and selling one of their best players for a lot of money is not going to do it. Although Inter are keen on keeping him, they are open to selling him if Manchester City give them an offer they can't refuse. Moving on, let's go to the Arsenal. We're going to talk about Gabriel, who is the very promising young Brazilian center back for Lille. He has been linked with many top clubs in Europe, including Napoli, but Arsenal seem to be the favorite to land his signature. He's been coveted by Napoli to replace Koulibaly after what will be an inevitable sale this summer. Arsenal have already agreed to a 22 million euro fee with Lille for the services of Gabriel. However, reports are surfacing that Manchester United are hijacking this deal. Now, reports are mixed right now. Some are saying that a medical has already been completed in the Emirates. Some are saying Man United have thrown their hat into the ring and that this transfer is wide open, and that Arsenal could potentially miss out on Gabriel, despite already agreeing to a transfer fee with Lille earlier in the summer. But whoever lands this player will be getting a very good defender, a young defender, to revitalize their back line. And Arsenal would be the best fit, considering that their center back position has been a disaster since the departure of former captain Laurent Koscielny. Now let's talk about Ben Chilwell, the left back from England, from Leicester, the 23-year-old. Chelsea are now closing in on a deal with Leicester, who have already valued Chilwell at 80 million euros throughout the summer, although Chelsea have consistently fallen short of that. And to be frank, an 80 million evaluation of Ben Chilwell is a very, very high market price to ask for. And if Leicester are looking to bring in funds and they really need to lower their asking price, and that's what they have done, Leicester have reportedly dropped their asking price from 80 million to 50 million, and Chelsea are willing to meet that price tag. The Blues have made Chilwell their number one transfer target ever since the season ended for them in Bayern when they lost 7-1 in aggregate. They have made left back their top priority in the summer. They've already considered bringing in Tagliafico from Ajax and Sergio Reguilon from Sevilla or the Real Madrid product, but they've remained hopeful that this deal would still happen, and that eventually, if they kept persisting, that Chelsea could eventually make an agreement with Leicester for Ben Chilwell. Speaking of Tagliafico, let's talk about Nicolas Tagliafico, because Ben Chilwell, with his potential and imminent departure from Leicester, leaves the hole at left back for Leicester. And Leicester are looking to make an immediate replacement with the left back from Ajax, Nicolas Tagliafico, the Argentine international. The Foxes are looking to replace Ben Chilwell, who is already set for a €50 million move to Chelsea. And Nicolas Tagliafico would cost much cheaper than it would for the Foxes, who are selling Ben Chilwell for €50 million. Next, let's talk about Michy Batshuayi, who has long been a misfit in London with Chelsea. It looks like Atalanta has opened talks to bring in the disgruntled striker at Chelsea on a loan deal for 1 year. And it's also important to note that Batshuayi only has 1 year remaining on his contract with the Blues. And so Batshuayi could potentially go on loan to Atalanta, the Serie A side who had a fairy tale run in the Champions League knockout stage. A Belgian striker who's played in the World Cup, he's played for Valencia, Crystal Palace, and Dortmund, only had one Premier League start last season, so he has fallen out of favor with Frank Lampard. Although he's a very technically gifted striker, he's very good, although it looks like he does need another change of scenery yet again, and Atalanta could be the place for him to do that, and especially since Duvan Zapata, the Colombian striker for Atalanta already, is rumored for a move out of Bergamo to go to Juventus. So Batshuayi to Atalanta would really revitalize this side as they go into their second consecutive Champions League campaign after having none in their entire history before last season. Final transfer that we want to talk about is Edinson Cavani, the Uruguayan 33-year-old striker, the PSG veteran, the PSG stalwart, who is no longer a PSG player. He has not played for PSG since Liga was shut down back in March due to the coronavirus pandemic. He is arriving in Lisbon on Monday for a medical with Benfica, the most winningest club in Portuguese history. Cavani has already agreed to a 3-year contract with Benfica, and as a free agent, he could choose wherever he wanted to go, and he chose to play with Benfica in Lisbon. He was let go by PSG following Liga's shutdown. He did not play any Champions League football beyond the round of 16 second leg with PSG, and will earn 10 million annual wages in Lisbon, and he will be officially presented and unveiled at Benfica later in the week. That is it for the transfer rumors, and that is it for our show today. That is all I have to talk to you about today. Thank you so much, once again, for listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before you go, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe to the show and write a nice review for us, and if you could follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until Thursday, I bid you adieu.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.